understand that question, because under the last Republican Congress, spending was out of control. We were elected and took the majority in 1994 by promises. Who remembers the Contract of America, right? It's a great thing. One of the shrewdest political moves I've ever seen, the smartest thing, because it laid it out exactly the way they were going to do it. The problem is the Republicans lost their way. They got in Washington. They got used to doing earmarks. They got used to trying to bribe people with their own money, and we lost our way. You know, when I got elected to the state senate, okay, that was in a year, if you remember, that Governor McKernan was reelected. Tough fight with Joe Brennan. I think there are a lot of us who are veterans of that campaign, working for him, stuffing envelopes. I got elected, like I mentioned, in a district that had never elected a Republican because I worked harder than my opponent. And once I was elected, I worked hard in representing all of the people in the state. And the first piece of legislation, and I think it's important that you lead by example, the very first piece of legislation I introduced when I was in the state senate was to rescind the legislative pay raise. I didn't make a lot of friends doing that because I thought it was in very, very poor form for us to be talking about raising taxes, talking about more spending, and taking a pay raise. My bill failed miserably. There were a handful of us, about 12 of us in the Senate who supported it, and a handful in the House that supported it. But when it was over with, I gave my pay raise to the Switzer home in Saco. Not because I'm such a wonderful philanthropist, but because I didn't believe it was right to take that pay raise. And that's the kind of leadership I think that's important. And that's why I think Republicans get elected in this district. They'll get elected in this district because they'll speak to the issues that the people are concerned about. They'll speak to the issues that make a difference. And when you are able to talk to someone one-on-one, whether you're knocking on their door, whether you're out touring a business, whether you're out just campaigning, shaking hands, if you can talk to them one-on-one and you can identify with them and you can tell them and give them specific plans on what you're going to do, and when they know that you've gone through the same things that they've gone through, that you understand what it's like to get the kids up and get them off to school and pick them up and then bring them back over here to Scarborough High School or Scarborough Middle School for a game, and then take them home and get them fed and get them to bed and get up and do it again. They want to know that you understand what that's like here in the state of Maine, what it's like to raise a family in the state of Maine. And that's why I know that I can be successful with your help in getting elected this fall.
The question is phrased as follows. According to the pollsters, a majority of Americans say the country's on the wrong track. Can a Republican candidate represent change?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's exactly what we've been talking about here. We've been talking about doing business differently. We've been talking about, you know, if you look at, excuse me, you look at Tom Allen over the last 10 or 12 years since he's been in the Congress. You know, he quit the Armed Services Committee, a committee that is so important not just to the state of Maine because of the jobs that it represents. He quit the Armed Services Committee at a time when our country was at war. He quit the Armed Services Committee when we were negotiating contracts for our ships that are sitting up in the North Arabian Gulf. Both Ruth and I, as Navy reservists, have been up in the North Arabian Gulf and have been on Bath-made ships up there and have seen what they can do in terms of surveillance, in terms of weaponry, and not to have a member on that seat occupying that seat on the House Armed Services Committee, I think is wrong. And you need to stand up for the people in this state. There are 50,000 defense-related jobs in this district. Whether you're talking about Saco Defense, whether you're talking about Pratt & Whitney, whether you're talking about Bath Iron Works, whether you're talking about Kittery Naval Shipyard, and the people in this state want to know that you are going to stand up for them. That is a huge change. The veterans in this state. I'm the only candidate in this race that supports mandatory funding for the Veterans Administration. And I think that's a clear difference between Dean and myself. Dean supports earmark funding of the Veterans Administration. I don't. I worked for Olympia Snow for 9 years. I was at Togus Medical Center. I've been down in Saco when I worked at the University of New England and the VA to put the VA satellite clinic in Saco so that veterans wouldn't have to travel all the way from Kittery up to Togus to get basic health care. Those are the kind of changes, that's the kind of leadership that I think is important. And without mandatory funding for the VA, I want you to pay attention to this because it's very, very important. When you have young men and women coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, missing legs, being burned, post-traumatic stress syndrome, traumatic brain injury, We have a sacred obligation to the men and women who have served this country and have protected our freedoms. The men and women that I serve with are half my age, that are out in Baghdad, kicking in doors, going after bad guys, 15 hours a day, wearing an 80-pound vest, wearing a Kevlar helmet, carrying the M16, day after day after day. And I know we have debt in this country, and I know there's a problem with entitlement spending. But I'm going to make a commitment to you right here. I support mandatory funding for the people who have fought for our freedoms. And we need to do that because just like President Lincoln said, we have to care for his widow and his orphan. That is a sacred obligation. I think we have no debt greater than the debt we owe to the men and women who wear the uniform in this country. Thank you.
The question's about change. I mean, there's a reason congressional approval ratings are 11%. You and I all look at Congress and career politicians very skeptical. Very skeptical. We don't trust them inherently anymore because they've been there a long time, they've been doing it for a career, and it's away from the very charter and vision of the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers spelled it out in the Federalist Papers. They wanted farmers and fishermen and lobstermen and teachers and nurses and doctors. They didn't want career politicians, especially in the United States House of Representatives. And look, we've got incumbent after incumbent, people who've been in politics for so long. You've got to question their motivations. It's just natural. But I've been called a lot of things during this whole cycle by a lot of people. But I guess the best one, and I'll never forget, my mother used to go in the cold water. She's 80 years old. She still does it to this day. She goes in the freezing cold water in York Harbor, Maine. She comes out, and my wife from Georgia goes, "How do you do that?" She goes, "It's refreshing." There's one thing I've been called throughout this entire race by Democrats, independents, social conservatives, and socialists, is refreshing. In fact, thank you. I will redirect your attention to the very article we're passing out here tonight. We were at a debate last week, all of us, all the candidates. We all stood up in front of everybody. And a Democrat and an independent was asked afterwards, they said, "Scontras has bold new ideas." You know, I hear it all the time. I walked out to the crowd in Arundel last night. "Gosh, you're refreshing." "Geez, I heard you on LOB. You say the same thing on LOB that you say on MPBN." "Yeah, that's because my father told me you say the same thing every time you're in front of a different crowd." So the reality is, can you have a change candidate? And the answer to you is yes. I have never worked in politics. I've never been in government. I'm doing this truly for the future of my children, and your children, and my grandchildren, and for the future of the country. And I hope that comes across with all the sincerity that I'm communicating it to you with. And furthermore, when I first started this effort, I come from an IT background. We'll email everybody in the world and everybody will vote for me. And I've been proven wrong. Because the way you earn this is you go out and meet Mainers in their homes, in their places of work, in their places of business, in your places of worship. Mainers are independent people. And I had Karl Rove tell me this summer. He said, "Do you know what independent means?" And I said, "No, I don't." "What does it mean?" And he said, "It means people vote for people and not politicians." That's what change is all about. If you come through with a sense of refreshing sincerity, honesty, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, Maine's a conservative state. We are inherently, almost by necessity, a conservative state. You go show me a lobsterman that's, that's not tough and weathered by the elements. You show me a Mainer who likes to spend a lot of money. No, we are a conservative people. But let's get back to the root of what politics was supposed to be. It was supposed to be somebody who was from, of, by, and for the people. Somebody who's truly a citizen candidate like myself. And I take a lot of pride in that. I don't want to go to Washington, D.C. I've not been appointed by anybody on high. I haven't been tapped by a sitting legislator. I don't have 20 of my closest friends in the State House supporting my candidacy. Who do I have supporting my candidacy? You folks. That's it. 1,200 who've signed my illegal immigration endorsement, 30 values voters or value voter leaders in the 1st District, over 100 business leaders, over 8,000 subscribers to my email website. And last quarter, I got a donation from every single county in this state, and I've never been to Aroostook County. That means my message is resonating. So you want change. I was encouraged to do this by the folks who want to see some change and get back to a citizen candidate.